After taking his closest friend, a woman, and myself to a concert, my husband began acting strangely. He arrived home late, and she admitted to have affections for him, according to my snooping. My closest friend Dana and my husband are acting strangely, and I'm not sure if I'm simply making this up in my imagination or if their behavior is truly concerning. We've been married for 4 years, and Phil and I are both in our early 30s. Together, we are incredibly content. He genuinely does love me, but I don't really enjoy that I have occasionally caught him lying to me in order to spare my feelings. Since we were roommates in college, Dana has been my best friend. To provide some background information about Dana, she spent 3 years of a committed relationship with her lover before their breakup last year. He also had a lot of insecurities about Dana and exercised extreme control over who she spent time with. For some reason, Dana's boyfriend was quite envious of Phil, and they avoided spending time with each other. But Dana and I have become closer since the split and spend a lot of time together going shopping, dining out, etc. Phil also enjoys coming along with us, though not all the time. Dana and Phil get along well as well, and Dana has advised me to arrange a blind date between them as soon as possible if I find another Phil. Phil, Dana, and I were going to a performance in our town 1 month ago. Given that it was one of his favorite bands, Phil was ecstatic. The morning of the event, I was feeling under the weather and just wanted to relax. Although Phil was sad, he informed me that we could give our friends our tickets and see the band at a later time. Since I didn't want to ruin it for him, I called a few of my friends, and Jess, who Dana and I are friends with, was glad to attend the performance in my place. Phil was still planning to call it off. However, I pushed him to go since I would have felt awful if he hadn't attended the concert. Together they attended the concert and had a great time. Phil never stopped sending me pictures during the night. Because of my medication, I fell asleep before the concert's 11 p.m. conclusion. I was alone myself in bed when I woke up in the morning. After dropping Dana off at the performance, Phil sent me a last message at 11 p.m., which said they were going. I promptly checked my messages. When I entered the living room, Phil was dozing off on the couch while still dressed for the concert. I watched for his to rise. I questioned him about the evening and his return home. He stated he returned home between 2 and 3 in the morning. He claimed that the traffic was awful and there were numerous accidents outside the musical venue. He claimed to have dropped Dana off at her house and driven straight home. When I asked him why he was sleeping on the couch, he replied that he was too exhausted to get out of his clothing and didn't want to wake me up. Phil's clothes were a little sparkly from dancing in the concert-goers' throng. He thus simply collapsed into the couch and fell asleep right away. It made sense, and Dana corroborated the account. That being said, strange behavior began after this evening. First of all, when I was hanging out with Dana, Phil stopped going around. When Dana was around, he would make up the most absurd excuses not to go out with me. Since then, Phil has also become a little distant from me, and I've observed that he spends a lot more time playing video games at night in his home office rather than going to bed. After we went shopping 2 weeks ago, I invited Dana over for drinks at our house, and she immediately began making excuses not to come. It had been a day since Dana last came to our house. Phil and Dana only crossed paths last weekend during a house party at my friend's house. Both of them were avoiding each other from what I could see in their behavior. When I questioned Phil about why he isn't hanging out with Dana, he told me it was all in his head. Dana stated the same thing, but then she starts making up ridiculous excuses not to visit our apartment. Their behavior seems strange to me, but I'm not sure if that's just me being insecure. How am I aware of what's happening? I've checked Phil's phone several times, but there aren't many texts between him and Dana. And since that evening, there have been no messages. I get the impression that something happened between them that evening, and they are both trying to avoid even giving simple explanations for why they are avoiding one another. Am I the only one who presumed the worst? It is killing me on the inside, even though I truly don't want to come across as insecure. Comments to which the operator has responded 666 NTA. Undoubtedly, something occurred. What exactly is the only question? She may have always had a thing for him based on what you said about her ex, saying she never liked him and wanting you to arrange a date with a different version of him. Perhaps she went all in while intoxicated. You should sit them down together, confront them both, and demand the truth if you are unable to learn the truth on your own due to a lack of evidence. Hey, I'd like to do it too. However, I have a feeling that if I'm mistaken, Phil will be offended that I am accusing him of something he did not do right, and I would lose a buddy as well. I have a gut feeling that something doesn't smell right, but I'm too afraid to open the door. Have you inquired with your other friend about that evening, Lopsided Aolani 476, to see if she has any information regarding their peculiar conduct toward one another? In either case, you ought to confront them. Instead of accusing them of cheating, You may say that their actions are unsettling, and that you would want to be informed if there is a problem or anything that needs to be done to justify their distance. Oh my, I spoke with Jess, but I didn't question her directly about any unusual actions. After the show, Phil and Dana headed to the parking lot, but she told me they all had a great time and she took the train home. A few _safe_3700, an incident occurred. What is the only question? Perhaps they did something jointly, or maybe one of them tried something and the other person said no, or maybe it was something else entirely, but whatever it was, something went wrong in their relationship. Oop. Phil arrived home pretty late, which is another reason I'm really worried. Although he doesn't usually sleep on couches, this was likely the first time in years that he had done so. In addition, he was completely covered in glitter. And the next day I discovered glitter all over Dana's seat in his automobile. My mind is just racing, but it might all be nothing. I just don't know how to bring it up without coming across as insane or accusing. Was the glitter on his body beneath the garments? Or on his clothes itself? Oops, it was on his arms and clothes. I think they may have hugged, which is acceptable. I don't know if it was on any other part of his body because he took a shower thereafter. Update: I said in my post from last week that my closest friend and hubby avoided each other after going to a concert together last month. I wanted to sincerely thank you all for supporting me during my difficult period and answering my technical problems. I apologize for the lengthy essay, but I was able to find out what happened when I confronted Phil and fucked Dana. Last Friday night, I managed to access Phil's phone for a short while. I was too busy to recover any erased mails. But I opened his camera gallery and looked through the pictures he took that evening because of someone's suggestion. The first thing that caught my attention was Dana's attire. Dana arrived at the concert wearing denim shorts and a white shirt. She only had on a blue bikini top after taking off her shirt because it was an outdoor concert. She had some faux tattoos on her back and shoulder that glittered. She had put her shirt back on by night's conclusion. Therefore, Dana had to have removed her shirt in the car in order for the glitter to be on Phil's car seat and his clothing. I lost all composure because I was so furious. I went up to face Phil. He started crying and apologizing to me right away. He said that he was to blame for going too far and that he had been feeling awful all month. He claimed he just wanted to forget it and did not want to inform me since he knew I would be very unhappy. He did as I asked, giving me a detailed account of what had transpired. He informed me that during the concert, Dana and Jess both drank. Dana needed to be held by Phil as he assisted her to the car. For an hour, Dana dozed off in the car as Phil drove. She began to play music and sing loudly as soon as she stood up. She once informed Phil that the automobile was too hot to drive before he could turn down the air conditioning. She removed her top to test the temperature. Since Dana's apartment would have required her to drive an additional 30 minutes, Phil stated he was getting extremely uncomfortable at this point and asked if it would be good if he drove to our house and she slept in the guest room. Phil drove her home because she insisted on wanting to go home. She was still feeling tippy, so as she was leaving, she asked Phil if he could take her back to her apartment. She said thank you to Phil and gave him a hug after, opening the flat door. They shared a moment, and Phil apologized for the hug lasting too long. With tears streaming down my face, I inquired whether they had shared a kiss. Phil assured me that there was undoubtedly a moment between them, even though he was unable to explain it. He told me that even though Dana had invited him in, he had to leave right now and hurried to the car. I kept asking him what had happened, and he simply said that they had an uncontrollable moment and left. Dana texted Phil when he got home, telling him that he ought to have entered the flat. Dana was repeatedly told by Phil that it was an accident and she should move on. However, Dana persisted in asking Phil if he enjoyed himself and if he is drawn to her. Dana was informed by Phil that he is not and never would be attracted to her, and he asked her not to tell me about it. He erased every communication after she gave her approval. He claimed that he sat on the couch because he did not want to hear what they had been chatting for so long. When I asked him whether he could get the messages back, he replied that he had erased them along with all of his sent messages and archives. All he wanted was to forget it had occurred. I thanked him for a comment after showing him my post. We headed to the SD card to look for the messages. The communications matched what Phil had described, and Phil was correct. I'm still really upset with Phil for not telling me about it earlier. This is where things became really strange. Yesterday I went to breakfast with Dana, whom I had invited. I informed her that I had spoken with Phil, and he had admitted to everything that had occurred that evening at the concert. I wanted to give her an opportunity to present her side of the tale, so I asked. Dana went defensive right away. Up until they arrived at her apartment complex, the story remained the same. Dana reported that after opening her flat door and giving Phil a long hug, she had a wonderful evening. She mentioned that although Phil seemed to be craving more, nothing further occurred. She invited him inside the flat, so I asked her why. She informed me that since he had been driving for a while, she wanted to give him some water and a snack. I told her that inviting my spouse to her place at 1 in the morning was a pretty bad decision. In the evening, she said that I was being irrational and jealous when she sensed he desired something more from her than an embrace. She yelled out that she wasn't the one popping boners during the hug as we got into an argument. I informed her that our friendship was over and she would never see Phil again. She began yelling that it was because of me that she knew Phil loved her, and that he did not show it. She continued by saying that I don't deserve Phil, and that I'm always whining about him. She claimed that, since their breakup, Phil has been incredibly kind to her and that, given the chance, she believes he would leave me for her. At last, she admitted that she could bring Phil much more happiness than I could, and he is beginning to recognize this. I turned to leave at this point, wanting just to prevent an explosion. I discussed what Dana said with Phil at night. He told me that, although he doesn't know why, he was aroused when he held Dana that evening. After the hug, Dana took his hand and said, "Come on in," and he simply bolted for his car. He clarified that although he feels bad about it, it does not imply that he is in love with Dana. He expressed his happiness at being married to me and expressed his desire to stay that way for the remainder of his days. It has been difficult for me to sort through my feelings, even while I am relieved that nothing bad happened between them. I'm upset with Phil for giving Dana a late-night embrace when she was hardly dressed. He ought to be more aware. However, I find it offensive that my closest friend had feelings for my spouse, that I was ignorant of, and encouraged the two of them to attend the concert together. Remarks. 1431 Winterfront. Make sure to tell everyone about Dana, and I would even go so far as to alter both of your phone numbers. Even so, I wouldn't get Phil off the hook because he concealed it from you, let you hang out with her, and whatever the fuck that means had a moment, and continued to lie to you and text her after that. I would ask him to get back your trust by scheduling marriage counseling. Yes, I've let him know how angry it makes me feel. Rather than playing cat and mouse with Dana, he ought to have seen that her taking off her shirt and automobile was a huge red signal, and told me about it all. Not wanting to go to the concert at first, he wrote _romance. I wonder whether she had already placed him in an embarrassing situation. We discussed this already. He said that this was something she had never said or done before. However, he also mentioned that the only other occasion he had spent time with her was when I was with them. Romance is emphasized in writing. I'm happy you were able to solve the mystery. I must admit that this story made me uncomfortable for some reason. Normally I could read these and be impartial, but something told me in my stomach that your companion was acting like she was a tree. I considered Dana to be a sister throughout the years. It's usually the least likely folks that you suspect. Why she would do that to me is beyond me. It is quite unpleasant. Leaks emphasizes don't absolve Phil of responsibility. He should focus on your relationship with him because he made a lot of poor decisions that evening. Friends wouldn't harm you in such a way, which is why Dana wasn't your friend. Well, I won't, and I'm furious with him for it. He has previously withheld information from me in an effort to hurt my sentiments. In an attempt to shield everyone around him, he constantly attempts to take on and fix everyone else's problems. One day, it will damage him. Let's go on to the next tale. Narrative 2. My son broke the family heirloom vase. I repeatedly offered to replace it, but he declined. He's been hating it ever since, calling my son names, and getting upset when I purchased him a new one. My father purchased a large glass vase when I was a teenager, and he filled it with wine corks. It remained on top of a little table in the living room for years. My family has a monthly lunch date with him. When my son was playing around in my father's living room in October of last year, he unintentionally knocked over the table, which resulted in the vase breaking and falling. I said I was sorry right away and promised to get a new vase. My spouse and I also did the cleanup. My offer to replace it was turned down by my father. He remarked at the time that he knew it was an accident, and that all he was happy about was that my son wasn't wounded. There was a lot of glass on the floor, and he was 2 years old. I repeatedly offered to pay for a new vase and apologized throughout the course of the following few months. My father went on to say everything was all right. But my father began gushing about how much he adored the cork vase early this year, and how costly it had been at the time of his purchase. As the months passed, his grievances grew more intense. Whenever we visited, he would comment on how my son had nearly always broken the vase. He would also sometimes joke that we ought to give ourselves more advance notice for our visits so he could conceal his valuables from my child. We went to the party he gave at his apartment last week. When a friend of his who hadn't been over in a while spotted the vase missing and inquired about it, my father told the buddy that I hadn't replaced it and that my little shit had shattered it. My spouse heard it from a neighboring location. I confronted my father after the party, and we got into a fight. He claimed that because my son had harmed his property, he was entitled to a complaint. I responded by telling him that although he is entitled to be angry, He does not have the right to whine about my not buying him a new vase since he turned down my offer. Either he can come to his senses and make amends with me, or he can get past the vase and quit holding my toddler responsible for the mishap. He can stop calling my son names because of this. My dad continues to tell me that I'm not doing this right. AITA? Remarks? Christmas. Get him a vase forever, every holiday. Give him so many vases that he wishes he will never see another one. Issue resolved. I adore your thought process, so please make me unique. To deal with your dad's crotchetiness, buy him an empty vase and bring him a bottle of wine. ETA. Place the cork inside the vase. Bring up how many times you had to have a drink to appease him at the next gathering. Vorsky, I was considering getting some champagne and a new vase. The vase is then smashed once more when the cork is released and hits it. 0311 is the Marine _ NTA, FFS, your son was acting like a toddler. The house ought to have been toddler-proofed by your dad. He can STF you about it. You offered to pay for a new vase, but he declined. I've always found the collection and exhibition of wine corks to be strange. Hey everyone, check out how much I drink. One tiny bean, well, I suppose it depends on your method. On significant occasions like graduations, anniversaries, and big birthdays, my in-laws pop a bottle of champagne. They write the occasion on the cork, which they save. It's a great approach, in my opinion, to see all the reasons to celebrate that they've had over the years. I was forbidden from running around other people's houses, far from being an underline of wickedness. 773. My apologies for the complaints made by your father and parents. Furthermore, why not just purchase a new vase? My dad's glass water bottle was broken by my dog. It was an expensive bottle, $100 to be exact. Don't worry about it, he said, given that my dog just walked by as he had it on the edge of the couch. I actually located the exact same bottle and sent it to his residence. He claimed not to need another, but he was ecstatic nonetheless. We take the kids to a park when my friends visit so they can run around. When the youngsters want to play at my grandma's place, we sit on the porch. Youngsters should be taught the limits of where they can and cannot run. Since he is a toddler, he ought to have taken his toys outside or had some with him. My dad has a lot of glass in his house, so I can't image letting my kid run about there. Not only was he incorrect to complain, but you also ought to have simply changed it. This is a space ace case. Why wouldn't she just buy a new one if her child wrecked it? Asking if she had two is pointless. A rational person would simply replace it. Nefariousness 773 is far from emphasized, is it? And even if he had said no, I would have replaced it as soon as I heard him complain. In this manner, I could question him about the one I replaced right away if he did complain. I'm commenting here because it's the one with the most votes on this topic. I am aware that people assume I let my toddler go around people's houses unrestricted. That is untrue. In this particular instance, my son began playing about just prior to the collision. Simply put, I was too slow to stop him. During our next visits to anyone, my spouse and I have been able to interrupt him early. This is not typical of my son, who is usually a peaceful child. I also made multiple offers to replace the vase that day. He declined, so I didn't purchase one. I didn't think my father still wanted me to replace the vase after that rejection. I wouldn't expect someone to follow through on an offer like this, and I wouldn't hold it against them if I declined it. Oop explains why this has now become an issue in reaction to a comment that was removed. It's been months since I mentioned the vase. Only my father is doing this. His remarks are growing worse, which is the only reason I'm being engaged now. Dragon 34, what is your father's age? Anger and personality shifts are associated with the dementia. Oops 60 update. I made the decision to make another offer to purchase my father a new vase after reading your remarks. I made it clear to him that this was the final time I would extend that offer. He would not be permitted to visit my son until he had calmed down, I threatened, if he refused and kept whining about it. In the end, he consented. The original vase he purchased is no longer in the store. I therefore began my research. I discovered one at a nearby furniture store that I felt was somewhat similar. Their quality was known to me because I had previously purchased vases from them. We had our monthly lunch at my father's house on Saturday, and I used the occasion to give him the new vase. At that point, he appeared appreciative and shared a cute moment with my son while they filled it with corks. I believed that this was finished. However, my father contacted me the following day. After researching the new vase online, he discovered it was less costly than he had anticipated. Are you sure this is the best you could find? He then inquired. It was then that I said screw it. His passive-aggressive behavior is over. We will no longer be visiting my father's residence for anything, I informed him. He is welcome to visit our family if he wishes to see mine. I stood my ground in spite of his protests. My father continued to express his dissatisfaction with the outcome, despite never having expressed his wishes. I'm tired of hearing accusations about my family members. Furthermore, I do not want my son to be subjected to this behavior on top of what he currently has. Thus, this is our current situation. My dad dislikes taking the car to come to my house. Thus, I'm not sure how our monthly meals will continue. Although I adore my father, I am deeply let down by him. I might be a little relieved if all of this means I won't be seeing him as much as normal for a while. The time apart could be beneficial to us. I will make an effort to support my son's relationship with his grandfather, which is my top priority. Since I don't reside in the US, the vase I purchased is approximately equivalent to $100 USD. My father told me that, while he can't recall the exact amount, the original was undoubtedly more costly. Additionally, he was more devoted to the corks he was able to save inside the vase than to the vase itself. I'm confident in the quality of the new vase. Art Shapiro comments, NTA, wow. His conduct is bizarrely ludicrous, unless the new vase is visibly substandard, which your description does not support. You've come up with what I believe to be the best answer for this problem. It is now his responsibility to show humility. Well, I've done my bit, even though I don't regret purchasing the vase. My father's response to this would never be mine. Furthermore, I have complete faith in its caliber. Van Driesen, NTA, he claims he's moved on, yet he can't stop talking about it. It's the same as when someone does you a favor and never tells you about it. Were they actually kind to you? Up until he checked the price, he was happy with the vase. If his first approval was based on the price, then what difference does it make? It's astounding how petty people can be. Thus, to him, the vase's cost is more significant than his bond with his grandchild. Good. Apart. From ad 6518, it's best for your child not to be exposed to that kind of BS. NTA, after researching the new vase online, he discovered it was less costly than he had anticipated. When a family member has made every effort to make amends, who does that to them? I will make an effort to support my son's relationship with his grandfather, which is my top priority. Bravo on that. However, your dad needs to put in some effort and understand what matters. Well, I hope he does. It has always been important to me that my child has a stronger bond with his family, because I was raised rather far away from all of my grandparents. Having said that, I know full well that my father needs to put in some real effort here. Wienerold, please watch out for your son. He's the little prick that cracks jokes and ends up the butt of grandpas. A humorous family tale has the power to stick with the recipient. Fearful Yak 7741. This reminds me of how I used to be made to feel bad for misplacing the pitch pipe that was included with my great-grandfather's violin. Like how my grandmother's outrage caused my dad to forfeit his claim to the family relic. I checked eBay and found a replacement pipe that cost $4 in its original package. For $4, my grandmother made me feel like a monster. Reader from Florida, allow me to offer you an alternative thought. Have you given any thought to the possibility that your father is suffering from dementia? As a patient with dementia may become fixated on objects and ask the same questions over and over again. I recently realized that your dad might be showing early symptoms of dementia. If it's dementia, you can start treating him, which might stop the illness from getting worse. As a social worker, I assist people with dementia. My best friend, I know people who are like this so long. They only want to whine in order to get attention, and they are never satisfied with any solution. Incredibly draining, and farewell to him. Same as bending a college graduate. I could see it almost instantly since others like him had left an impression on my memory. His lying is what bothers me. At his own celebration, he was lying when he said that they had never offered to replace it. We can tell that he is a whiner who enjoys it because of this.